Hey everybody, it's Joe Trippi, and welcome back to That Trippi Show with under the weather, Alex Sashlow. But of course, the show must go on, and Alex is here. So this week, one more huge win for Joe Biden on his way out. How did we get here? And of course, we'll talk about President Biden's farewell address. With just days to go until Trump's inauguration, we take a look back at the last 4 years, actually the last 8 years. So do some listener questions. So let's get into it. Alex, how are you feeling and where do you want to get started?
So, Joe, after the Gaza ceasefire was announced, and it should be noted that it's been announced Netanyahu might still screw something up, even odds on that. But we got a ton of listener questions. This is from Andrea in North Carolina. What do you make of the Gaza ceasefire deal? I can't help but think of the Carter hostage deal and how that whole thing ended.
Look, I think it definitely is something that Joe Biden was pushing for very hard for months, but desperately, and I think for all the right reasons, wanted to accomplish it while he was still in office. And so we know he was pushing very hard, pressing hard. Blinken was pressing hard. And look, I do think it helped to have Trump waiting in the wings with all the uncertainty and chaos that might bring, if the two parties didn't reach a deal. But I do think this was something, it was clear that Biden was pressing. The administration, they wanted this, they proposed this back in last May, and they've been working on it. But look, he got it done. It's still developing as we record. Netanyahu, as Alex has said, is sort of stalling. But President Biden announced, a ceasefire has been reached in Gaza, and hopefully this thing is going to happen and 30 hostages will be released. There's a first phase of it. And, you can't look at it any other way than this is a diplomatic triumph for America. I mean, Joe Biden, Tony Blinken, and yes, an incoming administration, but it was American diplomacy that made this happen. And diplomacy that they've been working on for months. And this doesn't happen in days. It takes months to make this happen, over a year at least. And it's almost as I said, the exact same deal Biden proposed last May. The timing of Trump's inauguration on Monday, I think it may have made it more urgent. I mean, obviously Blinken and Biden want to get this thing done before they leave office. And again, as I said, the prospect to the parties of the chaos of Trump and what that's going to create probably helped bring it to fruition after many months of hard work. But this was an American diplomatic triumph led by the current president, the current Secretary of State.
I wish that's how it was being covered. This is just another kind of example of depending on which echo chamber you're in. On the one hand, you've got Trump claiming sole credit. Of course he would. We all knew he would. But if you're hearing stuff from MAGA land, you're thinking, of course it was Trump. It was only Trump. But then you go look at who are supposed to be kind of the mainstream, unbiased coverage of this, and it's all both sidesing the hell out of it. And I feel like there's kind of there's a vacuum in terms of giving some kind of credit to the current frickin' president that I feel like people are missing. And it really just shows how bad the media environment is.
Well, no, what it shows is how everything's partisan. In other words, this was, as I said, an American diplomatic victory. I mean, it just is. There is nowhere on earth, in hell, anywhere, that this kind of deal could be brokered by anybody but American diplomacy. And it was led by President Biden and Tony Blinken. That doesn't mean that the incoming president-elect had nothing to do with it. His people were involved. That was all American diplomacy at work, and it worked. And it just tells you how important it is. I mean, actually, the interesting thing about this is this is what American engagement gets. And the incoming Trump administration is for isolation, for not being engaged. or, or my way or the highway, and, treaties be damned. And the Panama Canal is mine, and maybe Greenland too. And so I just think now that chaos, that chaotic rhetoric may have helped both parties say, hey, this is a good enough deal. It's been on the table for months. The Americans have been pushing it. Let's get this done. And of course, you have our diplomats saying, we want this done, right now. They've wanted it done since May. So I just think all that's reality. The problem is if you have normally you don't have,
It's going to be a while before we get back to that.
yeah, but what I'm saying is if this was Romney or somebody, they would be giving credit to the diplomats and the president for doing, and happily everybody wanted this deal done, including Trump wanted it done. He didn't want this problem on his lap. So that's what a Romney would have said. Kudos to the administration. I'm glad I could help. That would have been okay, but that's not MAGA. That's not Donald Trump. Oh, he alone did it. He alone, with his magic wand, can solve these problems. It's bullshit, but hey, 75 million Americans voted for it.
All right, Joe, we got to talk about President Biden's farewell address this week. And this kind of gets to what you said at the intro, talking about the last 4 years and even going back 8 years. But this is from Saul in Florida. Listening to President Biden's speech, I was once again in awe of the man. It's a shame how he's going out. I'd appreciate it if you could give an honest review of President Biden's 4 years in office. Joe, I got my grade. I want to hear yours.
Look, let's go first to the speech. He hit all the right notes. He did sort of invoke Eisenhower, not sort of, he did invoke Eisenhower and, warned people, the American people. Yeah, was Eisenhower was the defense industrial complex. And, it's the tech bro complex that is, clearly the oligarchy that's threatening today. And I think it was a very stark warning. Summing up his presidency.
I really liked what he said.
Yeah, well, that's what I was actually I was gonna start, quoting him actually. It will take time to feel the full impact of all we've done together, but the seeds are planted and they'll grow and they'll bloom for decades to come. At home, we created nearly 17 million jobs, new jobs, more than any other single administration in a single term. More people have health care than ever before. And overseas, we've strengthened NATO. Ukraine is still free. And we've pulled ahead of our competition with China. And so much more. I'm so proud of how much we've accomplished together for the American people. He wishes the incoming administration success, which is something Trump would never do, because I want America to succeed. And I think that's it. That I want America to succeed is in such a stark contrast to Donald Trump, who still is out there every day. And in his appointments, basically, appointing people to destroy the departments that he's naming them to run, and disrupt them. So, but I do think the warning he issued, as you look at Zuckerberg throwing Trump an inaugural ball, Zuckerberg, Bezos, Musk hanging out on the platform at the inauguration, Musk being essentially the shadow president now. Biden warns us today an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. If that is not a warning that I hope the American people heed and hear and watch as these guys take over. And yet, I think hopefully some of them are already seeing a little too much. Elon and the billionaires' influence on, and clear influence on the administration and what they're going to do. We'll see, but I don't think it's going to. I do agree with a lot of the reporting lately about them sort of way overshooting what they think their mandate is. Hopefully the American people are starting to sense that, but it's still too early to tell. And hey, he's not even in office yet, but it's pretty bad.
What about his presidency as a whole? And I actually think, I'll just spoil it and give you my grade right now. I think I'd probably have to give him an incomplete. because so much of what's going on is laying the groundwork for the future. But I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Well, no, it's not an incomplete. He did it all. I mean, he did all the infrastructure bill, the Recovery Acts, CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, the COVID rollout, the economic recovery from COVID. Yeah, people have complaints, but there's no other country in the world that's economic recovery came anywhere close to what the Biden administration, what happened under the Biden administration. I think it's not an incomplete. He did all those things. The problem is that none of them will be, or most of them will not become obvious to the American people for several years. A lot of those projects in the infrastructure bill that are going to be built, those shovels are just going into the ground this year in 2025. Yes, they got passed. Yes, the money, the building plans, all those things were worked on over the last 6, 7, 8 months, whatever. But the actual shovels and jobs that, and the spending on, you are starting to see, you're already seeing manufacturing jobs and tech jobs in a lot of red states. But they're just, those people are just going to be getting into those lines to seek those jobs this year for many people. So, it is a work in progress, but that's what America always is. America's always been a work in progress. And the administration, sometimes they get things done, and other things like the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, the growing pains of getting that off the ground, and the turmoil and the number of and so much opposition to it. And yeah, guess what? Maybe he would have given that a incomplete at the time. Well, now, years later, I suspect Donald Trump will still try to kill the Affordable Care Act. The American people do not want that to go away. They don't want to end affordable health care and Obamacare. So, that's what I'm saying. Each administration, now, I should say, except for one that didn't create a whole lot of jobs, told people to use bleach. So, but the thing about the Biden administration is, and Simon Rosenberg talks about this a lot, that, I don't remember, he has those numbers at the top of his head, but something like 40 million jobs were created during the Clinton, Obama, and Biden administration. And by the way, like half of them during the Biden one term. The other two had 2 terms. So I think it totaled 40 million. The Republican total of both Bushes and Trump is like single digit. And I think it's pretty embarrassing single digits. And I think under Trump, it was zip or near zip. So why the loss, we can keep going, back on that, but the same thing. You get out of COVID, you have the best economic recovery of anywhere in the world, but damn, gas is up, prices are up, eggs are up, all that stuff is up. And yeah, I'm glad that there's jobs being created, but I can't pay my bills. And that is changing too, as wage growth outpaces inflation now, but that too will happen. And guess who will be standing there saying he did it? He got peace and he got a ceasefire, and
Right.
he's the reason that the economy's moving and you feel better. And again, given our broken, fragmented news media and the way they do the both sides thing, wittingly or not, aid and abet him in his lies. And so, that's something that I think it was really important for president to address the nation and warn of the oligarchy that's now taking hold.
I mean, you got to look at international too. I mean, huge. We could talk about the Afghanistan withdrawal, but really the Ukraine is the headliner here.
Well, of course. I mean, holding the line against Putin and, rebuilding America's image and strength internationally. I suspect a lot of that was damaged by the election, by what we did as voters. And I mean, sending Trump back probably just immediately undid a lot of America's image with world leaders and other countries around the world. But the defining image of his presidency has to be him standing in Kiev with President Zelensky, in the same spot that Putin predicted he'd be 3 days after the invasion. And that's, again, we'll see, but it's, I don't think there's anybody who holds a whole lot of hope that Donald Trump will be anywhere near as supportive in the defense of Ukraine, and much more likely to be siding with Putin, given his rhetoric and everything we know about him, and how he bows to Putin's whims. So there's a stark thing there. And the same with NATO, holding that NATO alliance. The alliance, Biden and Blinken were able to put together with a lot of, like Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries, in the defense against Iran's missile attack on Israel. These are pretty amazing accomplishments, diplomatic accomplishments, now capped off, again, the showing that diplomacy is tough but can work, with the ceasefire that they've obviously been working on as he hits his administration's final days.
Joe, I know you mentioned at the top the last 8 years, and this is a listener question from Ben in Missouri. When I think back to the first part of the Trump presidency in 2017, I think of all the big resistance movements that started, like the Women's March, etc. But where are they now? How do we make sure that whatever builds in the next 4 years is not a flash in the pan?
I think that what happened here was, he won in 2016. There was an immediate response, a resistance movement. But that quickly turned into the age-old problem, I think, of the pro-democracy side and of Democrats, that we viewed the resistance movement turned into campaign season in 2022. It turned, and so we went back into campaign mode, not movement mode. They have always been a movement to take us out, to take power and impose their will on this nation. And they would invested and built think tanks, media networks, you name it. They for years and decades did not look at each cycle as a campaign. It was a long-term movement. And so what happened was we went right back. We had the response, and then 2018 turned into a campaign cycle, and 2020 was a campaign cycle. And guess what? We won. So, now we've got this. We're still not a movement. They still are. And as I've said before, the reason they were so confident in 2024, and the reason we were like freaked out every time a bad poll came out, was because they knew we're on a long-term movement thing here to take these people and take power from them and impose our agenda on the country. And so they saw it as, hey, these folks will keep, if we lose in 2024, they'll keep the guardrails of democracy wide open for us to keep building our movement to do it in 2026 and 28 and 32 if it takes that long. And we are still in campaign. Actually, we're not. That's the other weird thing we do. Basically go into hibernation for a year or so and then start up, and show up at doors every 2 years in October. No, the question is a good one. How do we make sure whatever builds in the next 4 years is not a flash in the pan? It can't be a campaign. This is a pro-democracy movement we have to build and sustain, all of us. And that means, yes, the Democratic Party fixing itself, literally looking deep about what its ability to message, not just what the message is, who the messenger is, but what networks do we own? They have these propaganda networks. We need a pro-democracy networks. And so what I'm saying is I really believe that's what the big lesson from 2024 is. Hey, everybody, first of all, the campaigns, as soon as the campaign was over, there's, we're talking about our autopsy, we're talking about DNC chair, things like that. But there's no really coordinated campaign or movement right now, every step of the way, to define the Trump presidency and what's going on and to create our own messaging. It's just not happening. And so you see energy starting to happen, but I think the energy cannot be about, just 2026. It's got to be, what are we doing to invest and build a pro-democracy movement in this country that stands up and fights this oligarchy and the autocratic movement of the right? Because if it's just a campaign that we show up every 2 years in October for, they'll have so dominated with their poisonous propaganda networks. And we're seeing it. That's why people, with all the good that Biden had done and the administration had done, that's what they did to Hillary Clinton. They demonize whoever it is we're going to put up and whatever our message is. And their networks are so insidious and so strong and have been built over years that thinking that the media, the journalists are going to stand up to it. No, look at them. They're all bowing and moving and getting, we need the access, all that stuff. No, we have to build a pro-democracy movement and fight. Democracy is fragile. It ain't easy. And so, but I believe that if we can build that movement, that's what we're trying to do by doing these podcasts, by talking about Resolute Square, by urging people to try Says Us or Get Real, which is another great site out there. There's things we can start doing, but it's going to take every single one of us. And we'll be talking more about that in the episodes to come.
Joe, I think that's just about all the time we've got today.
Hey, Alex, thanks for hanging in there. I know you're under the weather and it sounds worse than it is, but I appreciate you drinking the tea or whatever and coming on and helping me through this one. Thanks everyone for listening to That Trippi Show. If you're sick of all the clickbait and disinformation and trolling, there is a better way. Says Us, that's SEZ.US, is live. Join us at says.us. Also, we are in the Google App Store, and reportedly in the next day or so, Apple has informed us that we'll be in their App Store. In the meantime, this podcast will always be free and is part of Resolute Square, so check us out and check out the latest at resolutesquare.com/Trippi. Please subscribe to That Trippi Show and leave a review on Apple or wherever you listen. Also, if you're listening to this episode on YouTube, please like and subscribe to get alerts when we post the next episode. You can also always send us a question to thattrippishow@gmail.com or leave us a question and a review on iTunes. We'll see you next week.
Resolute Square.